This week I have something a little different for you. I think it's something you're really going to enjoy, you're going to get a lot out of, and I think it's well worth a listen. I had the great pleasure of interviewing Lindon from Channel Robot about his work as a sample library developer and about his history as a programmer and musician. So let's roll the interview. How did you get started with programming? I know you've mentioned in other things that you used to work with Smalltalk, the programming language.
Certainly. I guess I started out as a musician, a starving musician, and then a starving record producer after that. And I spent some time in studios programming synths, just hardware synths. And that was my idea of what programming was. And I didn't have very much money at the time. And I thought to myself, okay, what I really need to do is get some more gear, get another band together, and get back out on the road. What I need to do to get some money is I'll go get a job, something. What can I get that pays reasonable? Programming seemed a good idea, so I went and did this course, this government-sponsored course in programming, which turned out to be nothing like hardware programming at all. But I did that, and then I got a job, and then I guess, I don't know, must have been 15 years later, I got back into doing music-based stuff. So I spent a long time as a programmer working in telecommunications most of that time. And as it happens, telecommunications is not really that dissimilar to audio programming. There is a little bit of audio programming occasionally in there, but it's all digital signal processing. So it's all DSP and it's all real time. So a lot of those skills of coding stuff, so it gets encoded and travels across the network and then decoded at the other end, which you and I call a telephone conversation, or even this conversation.
Yeah.
Turns out to be something that's not really dissimilar from a lot of the sort of things you're trying to do in audio programming. So I was a programmer, just like, a guy in a suit for a fairly long time before I actually got back into doing audio stuff.
And at what point did you transition to making virtual instruments?
I was living in Australia at the time and was really unhappy with the company I was working for. I won't name any names, but they were not very nice to me. And I thought, I really need to get out of this. I really do. So I looked around for, like, what could I do that would help me? I knew by then I got a little music set up in my bedroom, and that was spending, some late nights on and trying to work out what I could do to make money out of music again, like make a living, really. And I discovered Kontakt, and must have been Kontakt 2 or Kontakt 3 at that time, really early on, and very early versions of KSP. So I got in and started having a go, basically, with that, and wrote a few instruments and met a few people on the way doing that. There's a guy called Mario, who's Evil Dragon, or Ed, as he's known. He actually did some beta testing for me very early on. And I met you, Dave, at the same time. All these people like you, Big Bob, and all those people are way back on the VI Control forum. So that was my introduction to writing software for music, and so those were my first virtual instruments. A whole bunch of things called grid machine drums, and grid machine matrix, and grid machine chain, and a whole bunch of Kontakt instruments. Very old now.
Yeah, I think you started with Kontakt slightly before me, because when I got into it, it was Kontakt 4 had just come out. So I think you were there maybe a couple of years before me, but we sort of started around the same time.
Roughly the same sort of time, in terms of like functionally what's possible to do. Yeah, definitely. So.
And are you still working in Kontakt, or have you transitioned completely over to HISE now?
I've almost certainly well, that's not almost certainly. I've completely transitioned over into HISE now. I don't do any Kontakt work at all for anybody, even myself. No Kontakt for me anymore. I'm done with it.
Yeah. Do you still get requests for Kontakt work?
infrequently, maybe 4 or 5 times a year, somebody comes along and says, "Hey, can you do this Kontakt instrument for me?" Which I usually say I could, but here's a better option for you, and try and push them down the HISE path, basically.
And what was your introduction to HISE? And when did you start the shift from Kontakt to HISE?
Well, I discovered, I was at that point in Kontakt where I had quite a few instruments out, and I was trying to find a way to get, there was no way that Native Instruments had decided were ever going to listen to me or anybody else about the things that they needed to change in KSP as a programming environment, because they just weren't going to do it. And these were what you might call the glacial days of Kontakt, where nothing changed for release after release. It was just years and years went by with no changes at all and no improvements. So I was looking for a way out. So I was thinking about just coding it in C++, a language I'd never learned. And as you mentioned before, I was a Smalltalk programmer at one stage. And not many people remember, but back in the early mid-80s, possibly, or early 80s, there was this huge, philosophical war between Smalltalk programmers and C++ programmers. Well, they're both claiming their language was the best. So I was a Smalltalk programmer, so learning C++ was like joining the enemy a bit, but not really. But, so that's kind of how desperate I was at the time. And I discovered a product called Gorilla at the time, which is still in early beta, I think, and I tried using it. That really didn't do anything for me. And then I discovered HISE and tried that, and it was very early, and I kind of had a go and failed, like I think a lot of people do even to this day. But back then there was no documentation at all. It was just, very early release. But I could see the potential. And I remember sitting down one evening with my wife and saying, okay, listen, I'm just going to have to take 3 months off doing stuff and learn how to program using this new environment. I'm just going to have to get over the hump, which I guess most programmers know about, in that, you learn a new language and a new environment and a new library. There's a lot of early learning that you can get under your belt. And once you've got that under your belt, you can actually probably make something useful at the end of that. But there is quite a few long, hard, late nights where you're just going, why, and then you get past that, you learn what you're doing, and you don't make those silly mistakes anymore, and you get to it. So I was way back certainly in version 1.0 the first time I touched HISE, possibly even slightly before that. It's very early, but been with it ever since.
I came to it was, I think, version 0.9 or something.
You were definitely around, I think.
I was introduced to it by Alan Hickler, and somebody introduced me to Gorilla Engine at the same time as well. So I think I had a similar introduction to your experience. So you may or may not be able to tell me this, but have you done any either Kontakt or HISE work for some of the big names out there? I know you did something for Aria Sounds, and I've done work for those guys as well.
Yes. Mostly I can't tell you because mostly it's not released yet. But a couple of big companies, medium size, not massive or anything, but a couple of recognizable names. I've certainly worked for a few of them.
And do you enjoy working for other developers more, or do you prefer making your own things?
That's a good question. No, I think I probably enjoy them. I was going to say about equally, but I probably actually enjoy working for other people slightly more than just on my things. I realize these days my limitations are especially around stuff like the designing the graphics. I can do it, and they look okay, and they're fine, but it's not wow factor. It is not in the graphics. I realize my strengths are all about starting out as a musician and becoming a programmer, and then coming to HISE that way, and having a musical approach to what I'm building. I realize that those are my strengths, and my weaknesses are, stuff like all the marketing and the audio design and the graphics and stuff like that, and doing videos and presets and demo songs. I do them and I get by, but it's really nice if I'm in some sort of partnership with somebody to do that. It's really very fruitful and very enjoyable, because I build this thing and then I give it to them and they send back some piece of MP4 thing and I go, wow, it can do that, amazing. So they're all, I get really lovely surprises out of that partnership too.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same, especially with the graphic stuff. I do my own and I'm never happy with it, and I send it to the designer and I'm always thrilled at whatever they come up with. It's 1,000 times better than what I made.
Yeah, that's right. You move something 4 pixels and it looks twice as good.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize the number of hats you have to wear. As if you're going to do these things by yourself, you have to be an audio engineer, a programmer, a graphic designer, a video editor, a marketer. You've got to do all sorts of things. So if you can have partnerships with other people, it really does help. And I guess that's why some of the bigger companies have so many staff. Yeah,
they do. Some of them have amazing amounts of people to do stuff. You spend time working for them and you talk to their graphics department, then their marketing department. And I'm thinking, if I'm the programming department, it's just me. But,
yeah.
Bit daunting at times, but they tend to be lovely, those people.
Have you worked on any projects where you're not the only programmer on it? There's other scripters or people who are responsible for the actual building of the software side of it?
No, I haven't. That's never happened for me. That would be a really interesting and fun thing to do, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I've only had one experience of that quite recently on a HISE project.
Oh, yeah,
and it was actually quite rewarding. We worked a lot through screen sharing, and I'd do things and then give it to them and they'd go off and add more stuff to it, and then we'd bring it back and discuss it. And it did actually work out quite well. And I think with HISE, because it's so modular, it is easier than, say, with Kontakt, for you to go and each have an independent task and then bring them together.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So what's your daily workflow routine for, do you just get up out of bed and get into programming, or does it take you a while to get started?
Well, I get up, take the dogs for a walk, and then usually come back and have a coffee and get down to it pretty quickly. I spend a long time at my desk then working away, stop for lunch, of course, but then work all afternoon on programming. And so I'm doing minimum 7 hours, sometimes 10 hours a day, and at times 7 days a week.
Sounds like my life as well. I'm a creature of habit, and I just I forget which day it is, but I'll just carry on as if it was the same as any other day.
That's right. Oh, it's a weekend. Oh, what's one of those?
Exactly, yeah. So what are your favorite kinds of projects to work on, like synths, sample libraries, effects, that kind of thing?
I don't really have a particular favorite, to be honest with you. I'm entirely agnostic. I've only done a small number of effects, maybe 7 or 8 so far, and the rest have all been synths or samplers or kind of hybrids of that. So I get a lot of fun out of doing any of them. Really, I'm not really picky about that. If you ask me to do a word processor, it might be a bit of a unlikely thing for me to do, but what the hell?
I'm sure it's possible in HISE.
Yeah, I'm guaranteed. Some of the stuff, one guy did that enormous vector painting program. That's wild.
It was a crazy thing that he made, but it did encourage some innovations in HISE that have been useful in other parts, especially with the graphics, the paint routine stuff. He did encourage some new things there. So, yeah, I thought it was a bit out there as well, but the end result was actually quite useful.
Yeah, it was lovely. It's great to see. Amazingly powerful and very innovative.
I know with some of your early stuff, probably this is the Kontakt stuff, you came up with a method for slicing up. I don't know if it was just drum samples, but slicing up samples in a way that they could be stitched back together in real time to create essentially a time stretching feature without having time stretching available.
Yep.
Was that something you came up with by yourself, or you
yeah, just out of straight necessity at the time. I wanted to have and the drum samples are a good example. So like a 4-bar drum loop, and I wanted to divide it up into 32 different steps so I could play different steps at different times. So instead of playing step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, I wanted to play step 1, step 2, step 7, step 8, step 3, 4, so, and just jump around, and then to be able to do things in each step. So turn effects on and off, or play them backwards, or repitch them in different ways. To do, and it ended up being quite a sophisticated system in the end to do that. But yeah, it was just a necessity. I didn't know how else. I just didn't know how else to do it at the time, and in some ways, it's still a fairly valid way of doing it. It's quite possible, certainly in HISE these days, to use the sample offset to get you some way into a very similar sort of effect, but or similar set of results. But I've certainly been thinking about it recently, so it's interesting you should mention it. But yeah, I think I might well approach it that way even now. I still have a whole bunch of the scripts that I wrote actually in Python that take your 4 bars of audio and chops them into 32 separate different things.
It's an interesting approach as well, because with if you were just to use the standard beat stretching or time stretching in Kontakt, the beats are still the samples are still going to be played in the same order. But with your approach, you get the advantage that you can not only change the tempo but also change the order of the actual sounds.
Yeah, that's right. That was the one of the primary things. I mean, the first thing I was trying to do was think a bit like a drummer, in a 4-bar or an 8-bar loop, the last bar would tend to include a fill. So to say, here we are at the end of 8 bars, we're going to go do something else, which is what classically most drummers do. So I was trying to make something where I could play bar 1, bar 2, bar 3, bar 4, bar 5, bar 6, bar 7, bar 8, and then bar 1, then bar 4, then bar 3, then 2, 6, 7, 5, 8. So 8 would always end up at the end, sort of like in the right spot.
Yeah,
you could get a much more organic feel. So that's how I started. I started just chopping it into bars. But then it occurred to me, obviously, that I could actually change the tempo if I chopped it into just beats and just, or even just hits, which is essentially what Recycle was when it arrived. Must be 20 years ago now. Is just looking for the transients, finding where the beats are, and chopping up the sound and just playing that little bit.
And you mentioned that you used a Python script to chop up the samples. How did you get into Python? Was it just, again, necessity for needing a scripting language? Or
I was sitting there going, chopping all these things by hand, thinking, I've got 400 of these to do. This is going to kill me. There must be a programmable way of doing this. So I started looking for scripting languages that had some audio library attached to them, and discovered Python had one. It has quite a few, and one that looked really easy and simple to use. Can't even remember which one it is, but it's really simple. And it just allowed me to take a file and chop it into 32 separate bits and save them with their own name. So it's, really quite a simple. I'm by no means a Python guru at all. Everything I do or did in Python ended up being really simple, but just picking a library that would do it for me, most of what I wanted. And it's mostly about doing support things in Python, not trying to write a program to sell in Python.
Yeah.
Just doing a whole bunch of things, which is still true to this day. I mean, I still do that. I still have a few things written in Python that are lying around. So the current serial number generating program I have now is actually in HISE, but the original one was written in Python. And and I use Lua in creator tools as well with Kontakt, and my only contact with Kontakt these days is when people come to me with their Kontakt instruments and say, I want to make this into a HISE instrument. It occurred to me that the smartest thing I could do at that point, because there's quite a little bit of, building your sample map in HISE. So
Yeah.
I wrote something in Lua in creator tools, which will interrogate any given Kontakt instrument and generate the sample map for me.
It brings up an interesting point, which is programmers tend to be quite flexible with jumping between different languages for different purposes. Even if you don't know a language in great detail, because you know the basic principles of programming, you're able to manipulate it to do what you want, even if you can't do it in the most efficient way, or maybe it's not a way a professional would do it in that language. But because you have that understanding of logic, you're able to get the job done more efficiently by using your programming skills.
Yeah, I mean, that's entirely true. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I pick up a new language or something, that these days I tend to pick languages up by necessity rather than desire.
Yeah.
But so like picking up Lua to do this stuff in Creator, to create the Creator tools for Kontakt, the first thing I start looking for is, okay, so where's the branching if statement, and where's the loop statement, and how do I do this assignment? How do I write to disk, and how do I read from disk? And oh yeah, that's it then. How do I loop around this? How do I make a while statement? How do I do a for loop, and how do I read through these series of things? So I'm looking for all the very, very basic standard things that are true in nearly every language. The only language that looks from my experience, and probably is loads out there, but my experience is every single language I've built things in, except one, has had precisely those branching structures. And that one language that wasn't like that was actually Smalltalk, and that's just a massively pure approach to object programming. But let's not get into a discussion about that.
Yeah, I think my approach is the same. The first function I always look for is the one that will print something to the screen so I can test things.
See where I've gone wrong.
Exactly, yeah. How do I print something?
Yeah, how do I find out what I've done wrong?
It's essentially hello world. I always start with hello world.
Yeah.
And how did you find the transition from KSP to Highscript?
I found it beautiful or lovely. Thank you. So I like getting out of a freezing cold pool and getting into a nice warm blanket. Oh, thank you. Hello. Back to a language that will do things properly. KSP is a nightmare. It really is. I understand that, it's based on Pascal and it has to be backwardly compatible, but I don't understand why it has to be backwardly compatible. But anyway, and they make so few changes, and it's just, I mean, I went back to it after having spent a year in HISE, and I did something very briefly in Kontakt for somebody, and it was just shudders and horror, oh God, no, I remember how oh no, do I really have to do this? Oh no, all this convoluted stuff you have to do to make things work. It's just, ugh. I mean, obviously the Sublime Text add-ons for KSP help a lot. But, when a language needs the editor to help it be usable, then, really needs to look in the mirror at itself and say, maybe I'm not doing the right thing. So moving away from that environment, which I'd spent a long time in and struggled and been frustrated with for a very long time, to then arrive in HISE and find a language that was cleaner, purer, more sensible. I mean, it's not perfect by a very long way. There's tons of stuff it could do better, but it's got 90% of what you want done for you. And as I say to people, and if you want something else in the language, you can always ask Christoph. And if he's too busy, you could always try and go do it yourself.
Yeah, and the other thing going from KSP is in Kontakt that code editor was essentially a text box with a compile button, but in HISE we've got this full environment.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So it's much nicer to have, to be able to just interrogate a variable and find what's in it. And because the hello world equivalent in KSP is to write something on the message thing at the bottom, right? So you were seeing, like right at the bottom of your screen, there was this little one line's worth of stuff you could type out. It was just terrible. What was that? Eventually, you could get this debug approach where, again, Sublime Text allowed you to write out to a separate debug log, essentially. But even then, it's just not quite as friendly.
I think I might have dropped out of Kontakt before that became a thing. I didn't really graduate from Kontakt 5 to Kontakt 6. I've barely touched it.
Right. Yeah. I didn't do much, but it certainly is available in Kontakt 5 when I was using it, that you could have this, declare this log file, and you could write to it, which was a third party text file off on your hard drive somewhere.
I see.
So you had to go run your program and then go look at the log. Run your program, go look at the log. Whereas, like, obviously in HISE, you've just got your text editor and your autocomplete and all those lovely things to go on, and then there's anywhere you want to drop the console in your programming interface, you can do, and you can just say console.print whatever you want, and you just get so that level of stuff is way more user friendly and helpful.
And I suppose since you had some experience as a programmer already, how did you find the process of compiling HISE and setting up the build environments?
Well, obviously, as I said, I had one go early on, and that's probably pretty much where I failed, I think. I couldn't get Visual Studio to compile it properly. Didn't even own a Mac at the time. So I was thinking, oh, no, I have to go, learn all this. Xcode, what's that? Oh, God. Oh, grief. Yeah. Oh, what a nightmare. Maybe I'll stop at this point and have a rethink. But once I got back into it and said, okay, I'm going to take this seriously and do it properly. Let's go read all the documentation and find out and do the right thing and follow this David Healey's video, because he's usually pretty smart about this stuff. And I just follow. And to this day, right, I'm like, so what, 3, 4, 5 years in, I download a new version of the HISE source code and think, all right, what am I supposed to do now? So it's been 6 months since I've done this. I know, I'll just go watch Dave's video again. So I still watch your video.
Oh, that's good that they're still useful. I think I need to update them, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, but it's still the most useful video in HISE ever made. How to compile HISE.
Yeah, I think that initial learning curve is the tricky part for a lot of people. It was for me as well when I got started. And like you, I'd never owned any Apple hardware. I now have a Mac Mini, but
yeah, me too.
I wouldn't have dreamed of buying anything Apple until HISE came along.
Well, my wife had a Mac. That's what I used to start with. I just borrowed hers, put Xcode and HISE on it, much to her chagrin. But eventually got myself again, Christoph's advice: go get yourself an old Mac Mini, which is what I did.
And have you found any particular advantages to HISE being open source?
Yeah, obviously, there's a ton of advantages. The most obvious of which is that, if you don't like even something as trivial as an error message, if you decide you don't like that message and you want to make something that you think is going to be clearer, just go look in the source file, find the message, type in what you want, press compile. There you go, done. You want to add some changes? Add them, And now all the other things that you get out of open source are all coming to fruition. A whole bunch of people in the community, you and a whole bunch of other people, adding in additional stuff into the HISE source code, along with Christoph, to make it a better place. It's great. I love that stuff. It's on my list of things to do. If I get a break, the thing I'm doing quietly in the background whilst I'm sitting waiting for stuff to compile in HISE is quietly trying to teach myself to be a better C++ programmer, just so I can then start writing stuff in HISE and start fixing some of the things that I think that need fixing in HISE. A couple of things like aftertouch. Mono aftertouch doesn't seem to work properly.
Oh, yeah.
And I've had one go at it already and sort of like gone, okay, I don't really know what I'm doing. Maybe I better get out from here and just learn how to do this properly. So I'm trying to learn how to do stuff properly in the C++ code, and then when I get some time, that'll be the first thing I try and fix.
Yeah, it'd definitely be a good addition as well. I don't even think my keyboard has aftertouch, but I should probably get one that does. But I've found, I'm not a C++ developer at all, but I've found I've been able to muddle my way through making small changes to the source code, and especially with the help of the Juice API, there's so much in there that makes C++ a bit more user-friendly.
Yeah.
I've been using their reference a lot, and I mean, it gives you common functions, just things like index of for arrays, which you don't have in standard C++, but with Juice, you've got stuff like that. So going from Highscript or JavaScript to Juice version of C++, I think makes the transition a little easier as well, and allows you to add these small changes.
Absolutely, definitely.
So what are 3 things you'd like to see added in HISE? Obviously, there's the aftertouch, but think of 3 others.
Okay, 3 others. 1, the ability to load SNEX or script node designed and compiled effects into slot effects.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
And I know that Christoph thinks that that's a good idea because he said so. And the other, I should have actually said this one first because it's like when he put up that thing in the forum of what changes do you want, I was first on with my constant thing, which is send effects. So essentially, bus send and bus receive. So just 2 effects that one to send to anywhere in HISE and the other one to receive from somewhere in HISE.
I had a talk with Christoph recently, and he actually mentioned something about doing buses in a similar style to global modulators, so that may be coming in the not-too-distant future, hopefully before HISE 3 is released.
Yeah. Well, that'd be great. So that's definitely on my list, and it's been on my list since definitely on my list since version 1. I asked for it, a good 3 years ago now, and I keep banging on about it. That must be a real pain.
Well, it's still more effective than nagging Native Instruments to add effects or add things to Kontakt.
Yeah, you've got no chance there, none. Yeah.
So, do you have a third thing on your wish list?
A third thing on my wish list. Yes, a much better compressor
than the default effect.
Yeah, the default compressors. It's a lovely and interesting effect, but it's not very friendly.
Perhaps it could be done through script node.
Yeah, well, so that'll be the next thing. One of the things I'd be doing, I mean, obviously, that and other effects are like a tape-based delay, which you can already do in script node, basically. But I guess maybe that's not a good choice for number 3. Number 3 then would obviously be the really big obvious one that everybody wants, which is time stretching.
Yeah, that's been on a lot of people's wish lists since day 1, I think. So hopefully we'll see that arrive.
Yeah.
I guess the difficulty with that is choosing an algorithm that's friendly to HISE's dual license nature.
Yep. Tough to do.
Yeah, I suppose you could use 2 different algorithms, like Reaper does that, for example.
Yeah.
So they have a selection of algorithms you can choose from.
Sure, I'll be up for that. I'll be up for the whole idea of paying a license fee for each time you use some time stretching algorithm. I'm all right with that. I understand. I think there's an enormous benefit, as I say, in the open source approach that Christoph's undertaken here. But I'm quite open to the idea of this mixed model where if I choose to compile in some particular thing, like say a time stretching algorithm, that I have to have a license for that, and that's fine. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach as well. And then it gives people more flexibility.
Yeah.
So what tools do you use for sample editing? I know you mentioned your Python scripts, but do you use Reaper or something else?
I am my DAW of choice is Reaper these days, but honestly, the amount of sample editing I do these days, you'll be able to tell how little it is, because when I tell you the single sample editing tool I use is Audacity, that's it. I don't do anything else. Everything else I do in code. Spent a long time using the SOX utilities to make stuff, to do stuff.
Yeah.
And obviously they're all callable from inside Python. So, but these days I spend, if I've got something I want to do with a whole bunch of samples, then I'll probably write something in Python to do it.
Yeah, I always prefer to do batch processing. I use bash scripts, or if I'm in a DAW that has a scripting language like Reaper or Ardour, I'll write something in Lua. But yeah, it's the same sort of approach.
Yeah, I mean, occasionally these days, I mean, it's not uncommon for me to write a lot of stuff, not necessarily audio processing, but other kind of add-on helpful XML type processing. I'll just write it in HISE itself.
Yeah, I do a lot of stuff in HISE that if I'm just prototyping something that I'm going to do in another language, I'll knock it up in HISE first, because it is so flexible.
Yeah. And you get quicker results, and you get to see what you're doing very quickly. There's a whole bunch of obviously facilities in there to read and play back audio. It's just useful.
And my last question is Channel Robot, the name. How did you come up with that? Why Channel Robot?
Right. Okay. So this is a very long answer. You ready? I lived in Australia for a long time, and in Australia under a company called Good Robot, which was based on a TV show whose name I can't even remember seeing, but it was run by a production company called Bad Robot, which I thought was a great name. So I stole that and called Good Robot. And then I did a little bit of work. Then I came back to live in the UK, and just before that, I think actually, I decided I wanted to have a much more audio-focused kind of sounding. Maybe it doesn't sound more audio-ish, but and I wanted to. We looking for a picture to put on the front of the website for it, even though I didn't have a name. And in the Thames estuary, there are these old World War II fortresses, like turrets, like boxes, big steel or actually iron boxes up on legs. There's like 3 or 4 of them out there, and there's lots of pictures. And they're very iconic and rusted and old and gnarly and look like robots, right? Robots sitting in the channel. So I just thought, oh, look, they're channel robots. Oh, channel robot. Oh, that's a good, I'll use that. So that was it.
Oh, that's good. It's nice when there's an interesting story behind a name.
Yeah, you can see how I think.
Yeah, well, I remember the Bad Robot. That's I think it's J.J. Abrams' production company.
All right, okay.
I think I recall seeing his little robot logo, and he has his children doing a voiceover.
Red logo, Bad Robot.
yeah, it's his kids that are doing that little voiceover ident thing.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah.
I knew nearly nothing about that. But I just thought it was a great ident and a great name. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, how you get to your name, leading from things that have gone before, is interesting. Because if that didn't exist, then you'd be something else.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it would be completely different. And I before, I mean, again, the names is I ran a company in Australia that did multimedia called Two Moon Media, because the guy I met who I did some partnership work had a company called Twofold Media, and I wanted to have Moon, so I just so it's like, you know, who you meet, what they've done, you build on top of, that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, that just leads me to one extra question, I guess. What were you doing in Australia? How did you get there?
I was programming for a living. I was working in London in the 80s, coding in telecommunications, and the company I was working for was closing down. So we were all off to get other jobs somewhere else. You know, half of us went to the city of London to make lots of money, and the other half of us decided that we would go go look and see. And the programming environment that we were working in was very popular in a couple of places in the US and Australia. So we all sat around one lunchtime and said, well, we could all go live overseas for a bit. Oh, let's go live in America for 6 months. And then, somebody said, there's a job in Holland. Oh, yeah, okay. So we all, we all said, yeah, let's do that. So we all went away and applied for jobs in different places. And I applied for one in Melbourne in Australia. So, and I was going for 6 months, right? I was going to go to Australia for 6 months. And they fly you there and they put you up in accommodation for the first couple of months while you get yourself sorted out. And then, and as the guy said to me, no, don't apply for the 6 month visa, apply for the year. Nobody stays 6 months. Everybody stays at least a year, and which was entirely wrong. He was wrong about that. People don't stay a year. Almost everybody I knew stayed 10 years at least. I stayed more than 20 years in Australia.
So what made you come back?
Oh, love. My wife. Yeah, yes. Me and my wife met when she was 17 and I was 20. And then we went our separate ways for all sorts of unfortunate and inconsequential reasons. But and then we got in touch with each other all those years later, and more than 25 years later. So, and yeah, it was definitely, she was the one.
Well, that's a sweet way to end.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good ending. I like that.
Okay, cool.
Everybody likes a happy ending.
Yeah, they do.
So where can people see your work? Is it channelrobot.com? Is that right?
You can generally see my work done by me, including my graphics, at channelrobot.com. Yeah.
And if people want to get in touch to get you to do work for them?
Yep. Lindon at channelrobot.com.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
No problem, mate.